Hello, Honors STEM students, and welcome to your final performance task unit of the school year. The title of this unit is Rocket Payload Landings. Today's little mini online virtual lecture is going to be to introduce the concept of what we're doing, introduce the problem statement, just get you thinking about some of the things that you're going to need to learn about in order to accomplish the performance tasks that I've laid out for you. So, learning objectives from today's little lesson. First of all, I would like you to know what a rocket payload landing actually is. Those are kind of some fancy words. Be able to identify some specific examples of it in today's society. Where are we doing rocket payload landings and things like that? Number two, I want you to be able to identify some of the current challenges that NASA and other SpaceX kind of places face with landing rocket payloads on Mars specifically. And number three, and the most important thing that you'll end up creating and getting grading on, is being able to generate a list of some specific questions that are scientifically related to three specific challenges that you identify from number two. So we're looking for a list of questions that you could ask that are scientific in their nature to help you clarify the challenges that you identify through this lesson. So before we launch into the lesson, let's just see what you know so far. Take a moment to define a rocket. All right, so I'll be interested to read all those answers. Official definition from NASA is rockets are devices that produce a force or a push needed to move an object forward. And typically that forward means up and off of the surface of our planet, maybe off the surface of the moon or off the surface of Mars. They are used to do lots of different things. Most traditionally, we think about them as launching spacecraft, right? We think about them in terms of NASA, but interestingly, rockets are also used to shoot things like missiles and defense mechanisms, as well as things like fireworks. So what you see over on to the left is kind of the structure of a typical spacecraft rocket, right? Things that are very important and common is that no matter what, whether it's spacecraft or a firework or a missile, we have some sort of propulsion system. So something that is creating that push needed to propel it forward. There's also something called the payload system. That is also going to be the case no matter what type of rocket we have, whether it's spacecraft, missile, or firework. We'll talk about what the payload means here in a minute. The guidance system is something that may or may not be on there. If we're talking about spacecraft, guidance systems are clearly very important, knowing where they're going, having control over those things, but something like your backyard firework probably doesn't really have much of a guidance system. All right, so rocket payloads. The payload on a rocket is basically just a fancy term for the stuff that matters. So it's the part of the rocket that we're actually trying to move to a different location. So some examples are shown here on the left. A crewed spacecraft. So you think about like Apollo 11 or Apollo 13, all those old school moon missions. It's the men in that little capsule that are being pushed up into orbit. Perhaps it's the satellite, right? Sometimes we're not manned when we're thinking about spacecrafts, but we're just sending something up into orbit around our planet. So that's a satellite. It could also be the firework itself, the thing that goes boom and creates the pretty lights, or potentially the warheads in the missile launch. So again, a payload on a rocket is really just the part of the rocket that we're really trying to move forward. It's like the crux of the mission, if you will. All right, so we are going to take a moment here to watch a rocket landing, or a payload landing, I will say. In this case, it is the landing of a spacecraft and the people inside of it. While you're watching this video, I want you to pull out your notebook, and I want you to take some notes in your notebook. You can maybe do it in a Google Doc as well if you wish, but what's important is that at the end of this video, you're going to have to answer this question. What system are you noticing working during this landing, and how does the system help the rocket land safely in the ed puzzle that you're watching? So this question is going to come at the end of this video. You're going to have to transcribe your thoughts into there. What's also important is at the end of this lesson, you're going to have an assignment where you're generating some questions. So if you don't write down notes somewhere where you can refer back to them and they're only in the Edpuzzle, you may lose those ideas. So please make sure you're writing them down somewhere separate and then transcribe it into the Edpuzzle later. All right, so go ahead and take a moment and answer this question in the Edpuzzle video. What system are you noticing working during this landing, or maybe multiple systems? And how does that system help the rocket land safely? What kind of scientific concepts that you're aware of already are maybe at play here? And even if you don't know the exact technical terms, maybe you can just describe them. What do you think is being used technically to help slow down that payload with people inside safely so that it can land in the water without damaging the crew members? All right. Well, hopefully your answer had something to do with something called a parachute. Obviously, there was about 3 different systems of parachutes that happened in there. I also hopefully, ideally, when you're talking about what was at work, how did that system help slow down that rocket, you were talking something about air drag. So using the concept of air drag or the atmosphere around Earth to slow down that object, kind of a counteracting force against gravity to get it to slow down to some sort of system. All right, next thing that's going to happen is you're actually going to move to the second Edpuzzle video of the day. This is going to be an Edpuzzle video about the challenges of landing payloads on Mars. So you just saw a payload landing on Earth. This one's going to be about landing it on Mars, which actually gets much more complicated for a variety of reasons. During this next video, I would like you to make sure that you have your notebook or your Google Doc out so that you can make a list of all of the challenges that you learn about during that video as well. Again, as a reminder, the assignment at the end of these 2 videos is going to be you coming up with a list of really good questions relative to the challenges that you're identifying in this video. So having a list of these challenges somewhere other than just in the Edpuzzle video is going to be really important. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. You need to move to Edpuzzle video number 2. And thanks for listening.